The fluorescent lights hummed within the Florin Road Save Mart as Vin Diesel entered through the automatic doors. It was the start of evening in Sacramento, California, a common day in an ordinary locale. Seeking anonymity, he intentionally chose this setting. No cameras, no admirers, just peace. Vin sought to remain inconspicuous, his gray hoodie pulled up, baseball cap casting a shadow, and wireless earbuds in place, though silent. This was a tactic he employed to prevent unwanted conversations following extended periods on film sets and promotional tours. He wasn't seeking acknowledgement. His objectives were basic: eggs, almond milk, oatmeal, and some post-exercise drinks. He walked calmly through the aisles, his gaze lowered, careful to avoid attracting interest. Several teenagers debated the virtues of different energy drinks near the back, while an elderly couple carefully inspected apples. Somewhere in the shop, an infant was crying. He savored the tranquility, the feeling of invisibility. As he approached the refrigerated food section, an unsettling disturbance broke the quiet. It wasn't a scream or a shout, but a sharp, mocking tone, loud enough to be heard, yet controlled to avoid attracting the attention of security. It was sarcasm, steeped in malice. He turned slightly, getting a glimpse of a young black woman, perhaps in her 30s, at a self-checkout. Her badge identified her as LaToya. She wore a worn navy polo shirt bearing the logo of a cleaning service, and she tightly held a boy to her hip, no more than 4, his eyes wide with exhaustion, his thumb pressed firmly against his lips. She struggled to scan a carton of Cheerios and a pack of diapers, her hands quivering as she searched for her wallet. 3 white men stood behind her, in their late 20s, dressed in jeans and ball caps, speaking loudly. One, heavy-set and flushed, lifted a can of beans and tossed it into his shopping cart as if he were sinking a basket. "Think I could get a discount if I wink at the cashier?" he remarked with a laugh. Another added, "Come on, man. She's just showing her son how to game the system early. Gotta respect that hustle." The third leaned in, smirking, and whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Bet she's got at least 3 baby daddies." Their laughter resonated through the store, bitter and persistent. The cashier remained silent. Other customers averted their eyes. It was as if a collective agreement had been made to ignore the situation, but it was loud, clear, and dripping with racial hatred. Vin ceased walking. His reflection in the freezer door showed him tired eyes, a sweat-dampened hoodie, and a clenched jaw. He had encountered this previously, not in a movie or on a set, but in reality. His mother had once been LaToya, a woman striving to make ends meet, working 2 jobs, maintaining her composure for her child, while strangers humiliated her in line. The constant cruel comments intensified, each phrase intended to humiliate a young black single mother struggling to purchase necessities for her child in public. She was the subject of racist slurs hurled by 3 white men. The supermarket stood hushed. Nobody spoke. Nobody offered help. Then a figure emerged from the far end of the frozen food aisle. He was calm, steady, unwavering. Within moments, he silenced everyone. This individual was Vin Diesel. There were no cameras, no publicity, no script, yet his response delivered a statement heard across America. He recalled a grocery store episode, standing beside her at the checkout. He felt a blend of bewilderment and shame, not because of her actions, but due to the way the world was treating her. The oppressive quiet of those nearby remained etched in his memory. He remembered the manner in which she seemed to hold her breath, swallowing her dignity simply to navigate through the mundane tasks of her day. A third customer, a man, broke the silence with a loud, suggestive kissing sound. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with unwanted attention. "Swipe that card twice, once for the kid, once for me." That was the tipping point. Vin quietly placed his gym bag near the drinks cooler. He approached the men slowly, quietly, the way a storm gathers intensity beneath the deceptive calmness of the sky. No one anticipated his intervention until he was mere feet away from the group. His voice, steady and low, cut through the air. "Step back," he commanded. The 3 men turned, the heavier one squinting in disbelief. "You talking to us?" Vin didn't flinch. Let her pay and walk away. The woman, LaToya, looked up, startled by the sudden confrontation. Her son, sensing the tension, clung tighter to her. There was no recognition in her gaze. She didn't perceive a celebrity. She simply saw someone taking a stand when others wouldn't. "Mind your business, bro," the second man retorted, puffing out his chest in an attempt to appear intimidating. Vin took a deliberate step forward. "My business," he stated evenly, "is not allowing 3 grown men to harass a mother in front of her child. So yes, this is my business now." The third man shifted his weight uneasily. The tension in the atmosphere became palpable, a tangible force. One of the teenagers nearby had already instinctively reached for their phone, recording the unfolding drama. The man in the ball cap and camouflage jacket clearly disliked the shift in the power dynamic. He stepped forward and shoved Vin forcefully in the chest. It wasn't a particularly hard shove, but it was undeniably foolish. Vin didn't move. He didn't stumble or lose his footing. He simply absorbed the impact. Then, without raising his voice or altering his expression, he swiftly grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it with precise control, and guided him down to one knee. There were no punches thrown, no verbal threats issued, only a display of efficient technique. The man winced in pain but refrained from crying out. Vin leaned in close and said quietly, his words carrying a weight that belied their softness, "I'm not here to hurt you, but I could think about it." He released the man and stepped back. The man stood slowly, his pride wounded, and retreated. The other 2 followed without a word, their earlier bravado completely evaporated. The silence in the store was now different, thicker, heavier. It wasn't the silence of apathy, but of awe and apprehension. Latoya remained frozen, her debit card trembling slightly in her hand. Vin turned to her and spoke in a tone gentler than before. "You okay?" She nodded, blinking back tears that threatened to spill over. Her son peeked up at him from her shoulder, his thumb still tucked securely in his mouth. Vin said, "You don't have to thank me. Just finish up and get home safe." She bent down to retrieve the cereal box that had fallen during the commotion, but her fingers fumbled, missing it. Without a moment's hesitation, Vin crouched down, picked up the box, and gently placed it into her shopping cart. Then he said, not loudly, but with unmistakable clarity, "You don't owe anyone an explanation for surviving." Latoya looked at him, startled by his words. "What?" He stood and met her gaze directly. "I noticed the way you were looking down, as if you were about to justify why you were using that card. You don't have to. You're doing what you have to do for your child. That's enough. That's more than enough." For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then an older woman, perhaps in her 60s, stepped forward. "I'll walk her out," she offered. "She's had enough for one day." Latoya nodded, her eyes full but dry. She adjusted her son on her hip, swiped her card, and the machine beeped with a volume that seemed amplified in the stillness. The groceries were placed into a bag, and the boy wrapped both arms around his. Clinging to his mother's neck as if never to release her, they moved in the direction of the exit. Latoya cast a glance back, though I doubted anyone would comment. I hadn't witnessed such interventions before. Vin offered her a subtle nod. Someone should have intervened, and that intervention should be now. A smattering of applause began behind him, but Vin gently raised a hand, not in anger, but to halt the reaction. This wasn't a staged event, not a performance for an audience. He retrieved his gym bag and paused by the freezer section, allowing the gravity of the situation to sink in. A voice called out from the background, "Hey man, what's your name?" Vin didn't immediately respond. It wasn't about his identity. It was about something infinitely more significant. Vin didn't linger much longer. He collected his belongings and headed for the far exit, the one adjacent to the side entrance often used by delivery vehicles. There were no further accolades, no more stares, just a sense of quiet resolution. He bypassed the almond milk and protein drinks. Somehow, resuming the routine task of grocery shopping felt jarring after the recent confrontation, akin to forcing trivial conversations at a solemn funeral. The air outside was crisp, carrying the coolness unique to the time after the sun had slipped below the horizon. He paused for a moment near the exit, hands buried deep inside his hoodie pockets, and surveyed the almost deserted parking area. A few cars trickled in and out. Nobody was shouting, no one was filming, yet he knew the incident would already be circulating online. The teenager in the candy aisle had been recording since the tension escalated, and Vin was well aware of the internet's capacity for rapid dissemination. He wasn't frightened by it, but he held no enthusiasm for it. This wasn't a scene from a movie. It wasn't rehearsed. It was imperfect, human, exposed, and now it belonged to the public. He located a bench near the edge of the parking lot, settled down slowly, and took out his phone. Notifications immediately flooded the screen. Text messages from unknown numbers. Alerts from social media accounts he rarely visited. The name Vin Diesel was a trending topic, and even though he hadn't spoken to the media, his image had been inserted into countless captions. Vin Diesel stops racist in Sacramento grocery store. Real-life Dom Toretto protects black mother from harassment. One clip had been posted with the statement, "You don't owe anyone an explanation for surviving." That sentence, raw and unrehearsed, was now being shared between profiles, quoted alongside photographs of single mothers, veterans, and individuals holding EBT cards, displayed like badges of shame. He watched the video in silence, saw his own entry into the frame, saw the moment he grasped the man's wrist, and saw LaToya's face when he stooped to hand her the cereal. It felt surreal watching himself, not as a performer, but as an individual, a man who hadn't intended to speak, but couldn't remain passive. A dark sedan approached the edge of the parking lot. The passenger window descended slowly. LaToya was seated in the front passenger seat, her son asleep in her arms, breathing softly against her shoulder. A woman in blue scrubs occupied the driver's seat, possibly a nurse, maybe a neighbor, or a friend. LaToya leaned toward the window and spoke softly. He finally fell asleep. Vin walked over, his hands still tucked in his hoodie. "He looks peaceful," he observed. "He always does after he cries," she responded. "Like he empties out and resets." She paused, then added, "I didn't expect anyone to be of assistance. Not in such an establishment." Vin acknowledged that while she shouldn't anticipate it, he understood her perspective. She regarded him, and for the first instance, her tone adopted a fragile quality. "I felt insignificant," she expressed, her gaze fixed on the dashboard, not on him, as if I were misplaced, as if I needed to vanish. Vin gently shook his head. "You were more entitled to be there than they were." She exhaled, a breath that had evidently been suppressed for hours, perhaps days. "I'm uncertain if individuals like yourself comprehend the significance of intervening in that manner. Not just the words spoken, but the impeccable timing. You prevented the situation from escalating." He shrugged modestly. "I didn't perform any extraordinary feat. I simply chose not to disregard you." Her eyes met his, devoid of tears this time. Merely an expression resembling serene recognition, a shared understanding between individuals who have been challenged by life in diverse ways, yet experience its burdens identically. "If you ever desire a homemade meal," she offered, smiling faintly, "I prepare a delectable peach cobbler." Vin chuckled softly. "That is alluring." The nurse leaned in slightly. "We ought to depart," she stated gently. LaToya waved, rolled up the window, and the sedan departed from the parking area. Vin remained there momentarily, observing the taillights diminish, before turning and proceeding toward his vehicle. He refrained from checking his mobile device once more. He simply sat in the driver's seat, with the engine deactivated, allowing the tranquility to settle. He reflected on his mother, contemplating the numerous occasions she had stood in similar queues, clinging to dignity with trembling hands. He pondered the cashier, whose eyes darted away. He contemplated that young boy, his eyes wide, witnessing the world fail his mother until someone elected not to avert their gaze. His phone vibrated once again, a name illuminating the screen. Briggs, his coach, his longtime confidant. Vin answered. "Everything all right?" Briggs inquired. "No introductions required?" "I'm well," Vin responded. "I viewed the video," Briggs continued. "They've already prominently displayed your name on every blog and news ticker. Do you desire me to manage the narrative or permit it to unfold naturally?" Vin sighed. "Allow it to unfold naturally, I presume. But steel yourself. This isn't merely another fleeting viral clip. People are discussing it. I didn't undertake it for that purpose," Vin stated plainly. "I comprehend." "That's why it holds significance." They remained in silence for a moment, then Briggs inquired, "Are you returning to the gymnasium?" Vin glanced at the clock. "Not this evening." "Understood," Briggs said. "Contact me tomorrow. I'm proud of you, man." Vin ended the call, initiated the engine, but refrained from shifting into drive. Instead, he permitted the vehicle to idle and contemplated that statement. You owe no one an explanation for enduring. He hadn't intended to articulate it. It simply emerged. But now, it possessed a life of its own. Individuals were reposting it, disseminating it alongside their personal narratives. Stories of experiencing poverty, being disregarded, being made to feel misplaced in environments where everyone should feel entitled to belong. The following morning, Vin's phone was rendered inoperable by sunrise, battery depleted, voicemail saturated. The clip had infiltrated mainstream news, unedited, devoid of dramatic music, solely featuring him. Hood up, calm voice, controlled hands, and that solitary line. Influencers commenced tagging him. Podcasts requested interviews. He remained unresponsive. He returned to the gymnasium, utilizing the same punching bag, donning the same hoodie, generating the same perspiration. Briggs greeted him with a raised eyebrow and a tablet in hand. Good morning, America desires your presence tomorrow. Vin didn't even glance. I'm abstaining from press engagements. The press doesn't matter, Briggs stated, emphasizing the public's need to hear Vin's perspective. Vin, after tightening the tape encircling his wrist, stood up and simply declared, "The video speaks for itself." Briggs paused, recalling a past incident. "Do you remember when you were assaulted outside Lincoln Middle?" "Yes," Vin confirmed. "You didn't retaliate then," Briggs pointed out. "Because if I had, I would have been the one arrested," Vin explained. "You told me that in the emergency room," Briggs reminded him. "It's still true," Briggs affirmed. "The same principle applies." Vin countered, "I only fight when someone is in need of my help." Briggs offered a single nod, conceding the point. Elsewhere, Latoya sat on her couch, her son asleep peacefully beside her. A friend had sent her the video clip. Initially, she was unaware that anyone had captured the incident. Her initial impulse was to delete it, as the embarrassment was still raw. However, curiosity prevailed. She watched it once, then again, and yet again. She heard her own voice, saw herself shrinking in fear, and then witnessed Vin stepping forward, calm and collected. There was no ostentation, just a steady presence. She reached for her phone, opened the notes application, and began to write. She recounted the experience of losing her job at the hospital laundry after the third round of layoffs, the struggle of taking extra shifts at a motel just to make ends meet, the humiliation of using her EBT card while strangers whispered judgments. She also wrote about her son's heartbreaking question, whether people hated them because they were poor. Then she transitioned to writing about Vin. She concluded her post with a line that was unplanned. "Some people throw punches while others stand still, so the rest of us can breathe." Within an hour, it was shared 100 times, then 1,000, eventually reaching 10,000 shares. As the week drew to a close, the digital fervor began to subside, the hashtag lost traction, and the media's attention shifted to the next scandal and viral clip, as it often did. However, something subtler lingered behind the headlines, a lingering sentiment. Vin remained indifferent to the noise. He never cared for it. His life quickly fell back into a familiar rhythm. Early morning runs through the quiet Sacramento streets, solitary weightlifting, focused sparring, and taping his hands in the gym's back room. The world could continue its clamor, but he would keep moving. Yet, the feeling from that night stayed with him, unlike other fleeting moments. It was a persistent weight, a small stone lodged in his chest that he couldn't quite dislodge. Perhaps it was Latoya's expression, or maybe the way her son had observed him, not with adoration, but with a tentative and quiet hope. It could have been his own reflection glimpsed in the freezer door, reminding him of a time when he was powerless to shield his mother from a harsh world. On Friday afternoon, Vin drove into the parking area of the Southside Community Center on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. While not a grand building, it radiated warmth. Children in mismatched sneakers dashed around the parking lot. Parents shared carpools, and laughter echoed from behind the glass windows. He wasn't there to coach anyone, at least not officially. He didn't arrive with cameras or a publicist, just a gym bag containing used gloves, wraps, and sneakers. Items that he no longer needed, but that another child might find valuable. He entered quietly, intending to drop off the bag and leave. However, as he approached the front desk, a voice called out his name. "Vin?" He turned to see Latoya standing near the entrance to the playroom, a binder tucked securely under one arm. Her other hand gently rested on the shoulder of her son, Miles. The boy was clutching a juice box, clutching a box securely in both hands, his eyes reflecting surprise. Vin encountered Latoya. Her smile conveyed a sense of ease, contrasting sharply with her recent viral notoriety. It was as if they were meeting casually in a familiar setting. Vin returned a slight smile. "I didn't expect to see you here," he commented. "I volunteer on Fridays," she responded. "They host a parenting class, and I assist with the intake process. The compensation consists of juice boxes and crayon drawings." Miles, who was nearby, approached Vin and gently tugged on his hoodie. "You helped my mom," he stated, his tone deliberate and carrying a practiced weight. Vin glanced down at him and affirmed, "Yeah, I guess I did." Miles offered a small nod, then returned to his mother's side, resuming sipping his juice, as if nothing more needed to be said. Latoya emitted a soft laugh, one that spoke more of relief than amusement. "He's been practicing that line for days. He insisted on delivering it himself," she explained. Vin adjusted the bag he was carrying. "I brought some equipment I thought they might find useful. Gloves, shoes, a few extra mouthguards," he offered. Latoya nodded in appreciation. "That's your way, isn't it? Giving quietly," she observed. Vin responded with a shrug. "Loud doesn't always help," he countered. She studied him thoughtfully for a moment, the distant sounds of children playing filtering in from the adjacent room. "I've been contemplating what you said about not having to explain. I'd never heard anyone express it that way before. Not to me, not publicly," she admitted. He met her gaze, affirming, "I meant it." She nodded. "I know. It took a little while, but I believe it now." Reaching into her binder, she produced a folded sheet of paper. "I wrote something," she revealed. "It's for Miles, a combination of a letter and a promise. I want him to understand that survival isn't something to be ashamed of. It's not a weakness, but a form of strength." She continued, "I wrote it because you reminded me of that." She extended the paper to him. "You can keep it." Vin accepted the paper, unfolded it briefly, then refolded it, and placed it in the inner pocket of his jacket. He didn't offer a thank you. It felt unnecessary. Miles had wandered slightly away, playfully chasing a dust bunny near the corner of the room. Latoya watched him for a moment, then remarked, "You know, I used to feel self-conscious walking into places like this, as if I had to carry a detailed explanation for needing assistance. Now I simply show up, without explanation or apology." Vin regarded her and nodded. "That's true strength," he acknowledged. She raised an eyebrow, inquiring, "Is that what you impart to the kids you train?" He paused briefly. "Fighting is just the surface. The mindset, that's what truly transforms people," he elucidated. They stood in comfortable silence for a few moments, allowing the atmosphere to settle, neither awkward nor burdensome. Latoya then glanced at the time and announced, "I should get back to work. I have a few more families to check in." Vin raised the gym bag, prepared to leave it at the desk. She turned back before heading toward the playroom, adding with a gentle smile, "If you ever have a craving for that cobbler, you know where to find me." Vin chuckled softly. "That sounds dangerous," he quipped. She disappeared around the corner, and he set the bag down near the donation box, nodded to the volunteer at the front desk, and headed back toward the parking lot. The sun was beginning its descent, casting elongated shadows across the pavement. Vin paused by his car, retrieved the folded letter from his pocket, and opened it. The handwriting was neat and deliberate, the words of a mother writing not from fear, but from... With piercing lucidity, the words resonated within him, striking chords untouched by any acceptance speech. At the note's conclusion, Latoya had penned, "He'll recognize his inherent worth not from external validation, but from my affirmation." He refolded the paper deliberately and returned it to his jacket. The ride back was silent, save for the road's soft drone and the rhythmic tire thumps on the varied road surface. Arriving home, he lingered in the driveway instead of entering, gazing at the twilight-softened sky. His phone vibrated with yet another request from Briggs. Media outlets, even representatives from Oprah, were persistently seeking interviews. Vin remained unresponsive. He sought neither publicity nor the chance to narrate a story. The encounter at the supermarket wasn't staged. It was a break from the incessant clamor, a fleeting instance where someone observed inequity and chose to actively respond rather than quietly observe. A week later, a news anchor on a local morning program cited his words, "You aren't required to justify your survival to anyone." The studio panel nodded in agreement. The excerpt from LaToya's online post was shared anew, and her phrase closely followed. Some individuals are aggressive. Others stand their ground, enabling the rest of us to relax. And in an undersized neighborhood athletic facility, a new set of gloves were tied on a youngster's hands, passed on by an individual who thoroughly comprehended the significance of confidently standing firm without remorse. Vin never made public mention of the event, nor was it ever divulged during discussions. However, every aspect was etched in his memories, not for the consumption of the world, but for his own recollection and that of the child clutching the beverage. He will mature remembering that, on one particular evening, an individual consciously chose to acknowledge his mother rather than simply bypass her. That in itself was sufficient.